Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. All right, hello, and welcome everybody to this episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. There is no Jay with me today. You get just me, but I promise it's going to be an interesting one. Now, I have to credit Drew at AMI for kind of harping on this topic that I'm going to get with you guys about for many, many years and still to this day. And you all are going to internally groan, but I implore you to please just listen. I promise I'll make it a semi-quick podcast, but it's going to be about time tracking. And I know that this is very painful for a lot of people. I especially find visionary types and creative types really struggle and feel constrained by time tracking. So I want to say I hear you. I appreciate it. I know it's painful, but I want to explain a little bit about why it's an important topic when it comes to revenue. And as the person who manages operations and projects and a lot of the financials, in fact, most of the financials, I have found a lot of overlap when it comes to sales and time tracking. So, one of the ways in which I was able to get Jay, who's somewhat of a squirrely CEO, very organized, but also like, do I really have to track my time? Like, isn't that why I started a business? I really don't want to track time. And I'm sure he's going to listen to this and laugh like, yeah, that's pretty much what I said. But once I was able to kind of explain the downstream effects of time tracking and how it actually can not just maybe improve your revenue, but also future projects, and really educating the entire organization, it became a lot more apparent how important it is. And while even just last week we had this kind of conversation about his time, and he's like, it's just all over the place, and I'm having a hard time with it, and it feels like a lot of extra work. And I'm like, I hear you. And he goes, but I know how important it is. So for him, I actually have solutions for the types that don't want to track time. We actually found a workaround for Jay that works excellent. And he, at one point in the organization, had the most accurately tracked time than anyone did, maybe even more so than myself. So, when you're talking about dollars and you've got your CFO and they're telling you every dollar goes to software, every dollar is spoken for, it's going to certain line items on the expense reports. And then when you ask maybe the sales team, what percentage of your week was spent selling last week? And it seems like there's guessing that happens, or a lot of, I don't know, or maybe defensiveness pops up, unfortunately, in some company cultures. And that line item is more than half, if not more than, your expenses. Like your payroll line item is 10 times more than maybe your next highest line item in some cases. And it's amazing to me that it's the most expensive thing in your company that you've never measured. So, one of the reasons for the challenge here is when money's getting audited and time is not. Money has a paper trail. It's pretty easy to track. I mean, it's just like numbers, dollars in, dollars out. There's software that does it for you almost effortlessly. But when it comes to time, it almost feels like it's become subjective. There's a lot of behaviors that go into it too, where, if I look like an AI's made this even worse, if I look like I'm too busy, then they won't give me new projects. But if I don't look busy enough, then maybe my job's at risk because I'm now no longer as, utilized as maybe my coworker. And so there's a lot of technical political stuff that goes into time tracking, and you have to handle that with grace, I think, and acknowledge your company's culture and maybe their contribution to those behaviors. But revenue doesn't just break in obvious places. It can break 15 minutes at a time. So what agencies might know that you as a business owner don't is we're forced to know, I believe, where every hour goes. Some agencies bill differently, like they do a point structure or value-based billing, which I've also heard is now crashing and burning. But it's not unlike a law firm where your hours are your retainer, and where, we're providing proposals to companies. They want to know where those hours are going to go, and we need to then allocate for those hours. So it is a very structured type of time tracking system that happens like just from the get-go. So when you've got scope creep and rework and unclear ownership, all of that shows up in the hours bucket. Now, you don't need to become an agency to see that like an engagement is going sideways in the timesheet. And I knew that 2 weeks ago. You can borrow this instrument and house teams can figure out how to get some discipline and create a better operating rhythm in this type of situation. If you're thinking that time tracking is culture poison, there's probably some people that would totally agree with you and some that wouldn't. It is a very polarizing topic for some. So people can game it. It kind of reads as surveillance. Knowledge work, it does not decompose into neat little buckets. And the tracking itself eats time. So you've got like time tracking inception, which is really frustrating. And that is all true. Now, nobody is proposing like a permanent timesheet. We're looking at maybe my suggestion for you all, if this is new, is maybe like a snapshot. Now, I don't know how deep you would want to go in something like this. But if you've not done time tracking, you feel like time is like this massive bucket of gray area. I don't know what's going on. I know my revenue's leaking. I've got to get a hold of capacity and utilization. Maybe just do like a pilot. So one of our proposals to you all is maybe just take a couple weeks. And you're going to have weird weeks. You're going to have anomalies and outliers. But if you take a couple weeks a year, and you do maybe a team level and not an individual level. What I really love about getting this data is that you share it as a way to improve your organization. Listen, we're doing this as a team because I want to help understand where the gaps are. I want to understand where there might be inefficiencies. And you better mean it when you say it like that. Don't backhand say that and then become one of those jerks who's firing people because AI is now taking over all these low-hanging fruit work situations. Like that's not what this is. This is really helping to inform your organization on an area that you may be blind to, and maybe you need to make some adjustments. And this could be a really big indicator for a lot of major adjustments that can happen, where I've seen people who track time as a pilot often recognize that the challenges in their client services or customer service team has been largely because they haven't done a great job of understanding the work, and therefore sales wasn't even selling the right quantity or retainer to service this customer because they were using guesses or incorrect data or guts, like your gut reaction. There was no process behind it. There was no data supporting, hey, this line item that I put on this proposal is going to take 5 hours. Where did you get that from? I asked Bob over in IT, and he said that's probably what it would take. Well, it turns out Bob misunderstood, and that's going to take 3 times as long, and you need a tool to do it. So that's just a kind of a random example, but you can see how when you have the data to support those downstream efforts, time tracking is really interesting because when sales has data to support their proposals and their budgets, then the client services team or customer service team knows what they're working with, and they're not trying to backwards engineer. I've met several peers who, on the service side of things, are like, yeah, sales just sells stuff, and I have to figure out how to do it in the time they told me. And that feels really painful to me to hear because they know they're not able to do their best work or they're being sort of pigeonholed by an inappropriate budget. And it creates a lot of challenges in the organization and probably a little bit of customer kerfuffle as well. And you want to eliminate some of those items, especially when it comes to retaining your clients, making that as easy as possible, which means your service team needs to have everything they can possibly have within reason to serve that client appropriately. I'm not picking on these people, but I think one of the easiest teams to kind of help unpack this a little bit is the sales team. They're usually a pretty high yield team. And so you can kind of determine a couple of buckets. Like, is it selling core work? Like in the act of selling, internal meetings, admin time. We all have admin time. You can't get rid of it. Don't try to. It's just a pain. It exists for a reason. There's rework, um, and then other teams' requests. So if they're just self-reporting, maybe every day, I will say every day makes a big difference. You know how it is when 4 days later, someone's like, hey, that breakfast we had, that was great a week ago. And you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. The same thing happens with time tracking. The longer you move away from the day, the harder it is to recall what you were doing. Now, there's a ton of tools where you can track by the minute, turn on timers. But if you just start with like, here's like a self-implemented type of reporting. It's low pressure and it literally could take 2 minutes. Um, give me a couple of those buckets and where do you think that's happening? Because I know you're working and I'm here to help you. It's just a process that everyone can hate on, but I have found if you can get some good rallying, maybe a couple of, rewards rolling out, it feels just a little less painful. There's a lot of regimented organizations that do this naturally, but I do find a little more creative leaning types of companies really struggle with this. It feels like I'm being held to this box and I have to report and it's killing my creativity. And frankly, there is something to that, which is why maybe just running a couple week pilot is something that's helpful for you if you can afford to do that and you don't need to track your time for like if you're an agency. Give yourself a couple week pilot, maybe once a quarter, and you kind of evaluate that. Every time we do this, where we really dive into it once a quarter and we track time every single day, we learn a lot about our internal meeting structure. We learn about how we maybe over processed something that required a lot of granularity in the past, but it no longer does. I have to say that every time we do this, something amazing comes out of it. The tools that we use get better. I've been able to automate so much more. We use ClickUp for time, for projects and time tracking, and it's just too easy to do what you need to do. I've even used AI to build in an automated time tracker for Jay, the CEO, who lives and dies by his calendar. So our ClickUp process, working with Claude, manages his calendar, matches it to a ClickUp task, and automatically logs time and closes the task in the project management system as long as it was on his calendar. If it's unclear, it sends a list to his virtual assistant, who also manages his calendar, to double check and see if maybe something was missed or he did something that wasn't in the system yet. So there are ways to get a lot of accuracy, and maybe that's one way too, if your sales team is good about their calendar, which I'm sure many of them are. Um, that's really easy to look at. But just giving yourself some data can be really impactful. The other way I've found this working is not just on the proposal side, but it's on the rescope side for an internal project, that we're using maybe like past project information to sell another existing client on this project. And we go, okay, let's do a retro on that. How did that go? Could we make this better? Are there ways we could shave cost internally? And looking at like our budget sheets, which is mainly just time and dollars. And it's just something I can't imagine living without. And I know how painful it is for those who don't want to contribute. But the impact, once they see it, it really makes their lives a lot easier where they're not getting, kind of beat up by an implementation team who's saying, you didn't build enough for me to be able to execute this appropriately. And you're able to be a lot more confident in selling proposals that have accurate information in them, and you know that that client will be served throughout your organization. And if you're an owner-led or a founder-led company, nothing is more important to you than that relationship being treated well as it continues on throughout the life cycle of your business, being onboarded, served, and retained. And so anything that makes that relationship better, and that includes making sure that your team has enough time to do the work they want to do and do it well, is so key. And the only way you can really do that is getting some data. So that's just my little PSA on time tracking. I'm sure Jay will want to come back on with me and maybe share some more thoughts, but I hope you all maybe try out a pilot. Let me know how it goes. And you can always reach out to us with questions at podcast@stringcaninteractive.com. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.